Hello dear viewers, welcome back to our glorious channel. My name is Icarix, and the shouting, screaming git right in front of me is a lovely chap called Kunagusis. How are you, dear sir?
Hi there. Yes, just as we were starting to record properly, my microphone was just giving me a bit of grief. So
In other words, it fell flat on his face and he screamed like a git.
it did not fall flat on my fucking face, you git. No, it did not
Yeah,
fall
it's
flat on my face.
it's a decent enough approximation of what happened in my opinion, but
No, it did
let's
not
continue
fall
nonetheless.
on my face. It just fell a little bit down, just got a bit all over the place. It's you know, whatever. Anyways,
His words,
so-
not mine. But anyway, what's going on here?
yes, I was about to say that. We are currently, as of this video, as you can see, we are at war with the Marian Empire.
Dirty fucking Morians.
Basically, this is India. Or as best close thing to India we can get in DEI.
This is Elder India.
Basically, because the map does not really include India, it just has the most outer fringe territories of the Marian Empire.
You think they would actually make that a little bit more clearer? I don't know.
See, they can't. They're not doing their own tweaks on the map. This is the Imperator Augustus map, just for DEI, basically. The map
Alright.
is an existing Rome 2 base campaign map. They're just adding their own factions and overhauls to it. They can't actually do anything to mod the map.
Alright.
No, in fairness, there's some interesting progress being made in that department.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's been a while since I saw any updates, but Benjin, he's the author behind the AAA Generals mod I've been using. So you know how you notice my Generals models start to change over time?
Yeah, I have noticed that.
Especially when they rank up. That's part of a mod called AAA Generals, basically. Advancing, Aging, and Acclimatizing. It just means that your General's appearance model will tweak under various circumstances like climate, age, advancement, and rank. Benjin's whole Collihish shtick in many ways, his area of specialty would be a lot of visual and graphic design, let's say. He designs out of 3D assets and stuff. He's been a major part of the Age of Bronze team. This is a Bronze Age overhaul of Rome 2. And so he's been using what map modding kind of tweaking tools he has available to try and kind of play around with some ideas, like kind of more historical or authentic forts, for example, for fort battles, and maybe some unique map locations and stuff like that. And it's been making interesting headway in that department. He's been posting the progress in the DEI Discord under submods folder, or not sub-channel rather. But yes. So yes. Whether or not the DEI does plan to any major map extensions is its own matter. They haven't ruled it out if it's a feasible thing to do, but it's taken many years of work.
It's probably not worth it if it takes many years.
Yeah, it's its own thing. Whether or not it is worth it is its own matter, but it would take quite a number of years. Well, maybe it doesn't take a number of years. I think they're probably conflating that with the idea of overhauling the Empire Divided campaign, which is something they've said they wouldn't do. But this is a while back now, but I think they said they would consider doing it. They're looking into it. But yes. So we are besieging Harmoisa.
Harmoisa. Is that it?
Or Harmosia. Hard to tell. And the garrison, as well as the army inside, have decided to sally out, which is more to our advantage in this case. Well,
Sally out
more
and
to our
tally ho.
preference. because an army with a lot of pikes is not really the most ideal for a siege battle, and round 2 siege battles are a bit of a torturous slog, and I always just feel like the game was likely to crash when I'm doing it, so...
Well, where would be the most likely or better option to host a battle like that?
I suppose in that case, just the better thing to do is I prefer is to sally, or let them sally. Find it as a field battle.
I suppose.
I can better use my pike troops in their formation. But yes, so the Marians are sending their war elephants first. But a lot of the troops are coming at us, but the war elephants notably.
I'm not gonna guess what elephants they are. I'm just gonna get them wrong.
Well, I've always said whom the Marians are. So
yes, so they're sending out Indian elephants.
Precisely. They're even called, I'm pretty sure, Indicoi elefantes.
That's it. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that. I'm just gonna get that wrong.
Indicoi elefantes.
Indicoi elefantes. Okay.
Guess what that means?
Any particular attributes of these elephants I should know about?
Well, like any, are you talking gameplay-wise?
Gameplay-wise, yeah, or maybe even...
Well, gameplay-wise, Indian elephants tend to have, I believe, the best mass. Among the highest mass for elephant units. So, they're among the better elephant units in the game. I think the best are the Syrian elephants. Maybe. I don't remember. Somebody did a video a while back on that. Yeah.
Anyway, we have a really, really long phalanx formation there. At least I think
four
that's...
phalanx troops, 4 pikes, 2 silver shields, 2 bronze shields.
It's a really long defensive line there. Should be in good hands.
We have our Correa boy fighting their infantry. With our Correa spears on the flanks. So our Correa swordsmen do some fighting. But a bit obscured by the shrubbery. We also have our Galatians in the fray.
If you can even see them.
You can still make them out a little bit with those Latin swords and large shields.
That must be a decent indicator, at the very least.
Yeah.
Is that their signature weapon?
The Latin era swords, yeah. That's what they're most famous for, were their swords.
Really? Those particular swords?
The Latin sword was... Latin refers to the material culture group at this time period. Celtic... When I say Celtic, I am referring in this case to primarily the European continent. The term is messy and loaded, not everybody likes using it. I use it largely just as convenience. But when we talk about the material culture that we associate with Celtic societies, there is, and I've talked I think about this before, there is the Hallstatt culture, and then you got Latin. Hallstatt is like late Bronze Age to early Iron Age. And it's largely located in Central Europe. It's named after a site in Austria. And then we get to Latin, and Latin is a site in Switzerland. And this is a much later culture. By the time our Greco-Roman authors, mainly this stage, early stage Greeks, are talking about people known as Keltoi, or Galatai, or whatever names you want to say, they're talking about the Latin Celts. And so the thing is, the Celts were major ironworkers, and so they developed all sorts of equipment, military gear, that proved to be quite popular across the ancient world, let's just say, and quite influential. So they were famous for their swords, in particular. they were fairly long for the time period. Straight blade swords. They'll get longer as time goes on. It's not like there's just the one singular type of sword. It goes through changes and gets to some of the trend is it gets longer. Now, of course, not everybody had swords. Spears were more common because, well, yeah, not everybody can afford a sword or can afford to use a sword. So typically, so their swords would have been what made them quite famous because they were long and pretty solid quality, I believe, quite high quality. Although some ancient authors, and I talked about this in another video, likes to talk about the propensity for bending easily. Supposedly after one swing, they'd have to stick it into the ground and kind of kick it back into shape. But the Latin sword proves to be quite influential because, and quite significant, because it's not just in use by the Celts. The Romans adopted Latin B swords for a time, until they adopted the Spanish sword, which is the more famous sword we associate the Romans with. The gladius, as we would call it. Because in Latin, gladius means sword. And it's actually borrowed, indirectly probably, from the Celtic word for sword. So in Celtic language, you at least say Gaulish, certainly a Proto-Celtic, the word for sword would be a gladius. And in Irish today, the word is clave, which is derived from gladius, though as far as I remember reading, and it was in an article I read at some point a couple of years ago, where they were discussing foreign influences of the Irish language, and I don't know that I've had to find it at some point, but it mentions that the word clave, which, well, claviv is the old Irish word, was kind of, it was influenced by the British Celtic version of the word. So the British Celtic went through its own sound changes that seems to be the basis of the old Irish claviv. But I need to do more reading on that. That was something I read 2 years ago. But so Celtic culture spreads across much of Europe, and this includes portions of Iberia, the Spanish peninsula, known as Iberia. This is where we get people called the Celtiberians, because they're kind of a cultural hybrid of Celts and Iberians. And they seem to kind of merge two different swords, design-wise, into one. The Latin Celtic sword and a local, I think, Spanish short sword, maybe an antennae sword or something, I'm not sure. And this leads to a sword that we would call, that the Romans, I think they called Gladius Hispanensis, or Spanish sword. The Romans adopt that sword, and it becomes their primary offensive weapon for much of their history. Until they eventually, in the late Empire, replace it with another sword called the spada. The spada is a longer bladed sword, primarily used in the early stages of the Empire as a cavalry weapon. The spada is probably more directly derived from Latin Celtic swords, because again, those were longer swords, well suited for slashing. That element. And I think the spada, to my understanding, was the basis of like Viking Age swords, because of the great Germanic integrations and the interaction with the Romans in the late Age. They probably developed Roman style swords. and that I think may have eventually become the basis of the medieval arming sword.
Is there any definitive proof of that?
I don't know. This is what I vaguely read at some point, so I can't be too sure. But all I know is there's that. The other thing that we could more definitively say the Celts had an influence on, even as far as medieval warfare, I would probably say, is chainmail armor. They developed chainmail armor, or mail armor, which the Romans adopt and start using quite a bit. Probably the most popular body armor type of the Romans, I think.
Would there have been any sort of like special insignia on them to indicate that it was from that region? Actually,
Well,
I'm just kind of curious.
In regards to what established that it is a Celtic invention.
Yeah.
Well, one is I suppose the earliest archaeological finds probably are in Celtic regions, but the Romans. But also the Romans themselves kind of are open in the fact that it's Celtic style of armor. But we know ancient sources have described Celts as wearing mail armor. Diodorus Siculus mentions it. On the top of my head, I think. I know Appian mentions mail-clad Galatian cavalry. We also see some visual depictions of this armor, like the WAFARE warrior, granted that's like 1st century BCE, kind of Gallo-Roman, so still. But we also have ancient sources that just describe it like it's known as Celtic. I think off the top of my head, I know there's Varro in his work, I think De Lingua Latina, which was a kind of like an etymology of sorts, an attempt at trying to give an etymology or definition of many words in Latin. And Varro talks with the word lorica, which is the word for like body armor, mail. And what he defines and gives the etymology of it as like, referring to leather or kind of, or hide or whatever, kind of organic materials. He kind of then just talks about that this term got used to refer to the Celtic armor, made of iron rings or something like that. I'm going by memory here, but I do remember because when I was doing my thesis, that was one of the sources I used to highlight. But yeah, and the Romans were quite open about adopting foreign things as part of their military. Even a lot of their helmets were Celtic helmets. Montefortino, Culus, Aginport, which was the basis of the iconic imperial helmet that we think of Romans. All those are originally Celtic helmets.
And this is for sure the most reliable source we have on for this.
On the top of my head, that's about the best I can suggest. But as far as I understand, like archaeological evidence would probably suggest, I think mail armor is more as earliest noted to be one of the Celts, and the particular style that it's in probably developed during the 3rd century BCE, I'd say. And the Romans adopt it. The Romans seem to just have no qualms identifying that it's some kind of Celtic armor, and we know Celts are described as wearing it. Of course, not everybody did. Again, it's expensive. Mail armor is expensive, so only really well-off people would have it.
I would assume most of the high-ranking officers would get that sort of armor to begin with.
Well, nobles for sure. To talk about officers is so messy. I don't think we can know whether they had actual officers.
When I say officers, it's more or less my wording. It's more or less my personal way of saying like high-ranking soldiers, basically.
Yeah, I guess to put that like high-ranking members of the society.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then we know that also the Greeks start adopting this kind of armor. Because it's used to some extent among Hellenistic armies. You've the funerary stele of Salmas, of Medada, and that shows a male-clad infantryman. I know there's Polybius' description of the Parade of Daphne, which describes 5,000 infantrymen wearing male armor, armed in the Roman manner, whatever that means. You know, so another thing that they also kind of introduce to the ancient world, well, sort of, it's more complicated, would be their shields. Those oval-shaped shields. Now, they did not invent those shields. That, from my understanding, probably originated from the Italian peninsula. But they adopted early on, and it seems like through contact with them, probably other people started adopting it. Like the Greeks.
Of course.
This is where we get things like thureoporoi. The Greeks called that type of shield a thureos, meaning a door. Because it was kind of the shape or size of a door.
Uh-huh.
Now the Greek version was kind of smaller and lighter. But they started using it, and again the Stele of Salmas shows it. But also the Stele of Dioscurides. Now I add, those two are not Greeks. They are Pisidians,
like luxury, but money.
Who were likely in the service of either the Ptolemies or the Seleucids. There's those funerary stelae have Greek inscriptions on them. I know Dioscurides describes him as a Semeaporos, standard bearer. Yeah. So, yeah, suffice to say that the Latin kind of era Celts were significant militarily with their swords, many things really. It's also possible the Greeks might have adopted something of a sword derived from theirs. It's not as clear.
Well, the Greeks adopted a lot of things in their time, so I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't the case.
It's to do with how you interpret these particular swords. Like, again, the Stele of Dioscurides shows a type of sword that is described as having a bilobate pommel, and it's thought, and this is mainly on the top of my head, Nicholas Secunda and I think Jean-Charles Duplessis largely relying on Secunda, suggest that this is a unique type of sword popular in the Hellenistic period that was probably derived from the Celtic sword. But yes, because you see, the Hellenistic states would be getting Celtic influences because of the Galatians. Because the Galatians planted themselves in Asia Minor. That's what we call them. Well, it's not why we call them Galatians, but it's why we refer to people called Galatians as a separate group, because of the fact that there was a distinct group of Celtic tribes living in Asia Minor. And they were used as mercenaries by many of these states. They also clashed with them. Talked before about this terracotta figurine showing an elephant trampling on what's probably a Galatian or some sort of Celtic fighter. Which is interesting. Plus, we know the Greeks have been fighting against them. There was an invasion of Greece by various Celtic tribes. They even killed the king of Macedon's time, Ptolemy Keranos. he was killed in battle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they said they severed his head and carried it with them. This is from Pausanias, who was writing quite a bit later, but the source I read suggested his source was Hieronymus of Cardia. Don't know anything about him, but
All the same, it's still relevant.
yeah, it's still quite interesting, an interesting narrative. But I'm afraid we're gonna have to leave it here because we're nearing the end. This is a rather short video. But
Yes, we are nearing the end of session 8, so I wanted to save the juicy bits for the last part.
yes,
But anyway, that's all we have for today, folks. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe if you're interested in supporting us. And of course, we will see you all very soon.
thanks for watching.